This is Community Connections, airing on OROMIA11, and I'm your host, Anna Orr. Today's guest is Dr. Mahmoud El-Kati. He is a professor, author, activist, and a gem to our beloved community. Please tune in for this special episode today. I am so excited to have you joining me here, Dr. El-Kati.
I'm more excited than you
Really?
to be here. Yeah, absolutely.
We are a couple days away from Juneteenth,
Right.
and I thought there would be hardly anyone better to come chat with me about the history of Juneteenth, as well as to give an explanation about what Freedom Day is and all those beautiful things. So I am happy to have you here with me at Community Connections.
Well, thank you very much. I don't know if I know much more than anybody else, but I'll do the best that I can about Juneteenth.
Can you talk to me a little bit about Juneteenth and what it actually is for those that don't know?
Yeah, absolutely. But I want to say something else on Juneteenth, about history.
Yes, sir.
While we have this moment in time, at this particular moment in the history of this republic called America,
I'd be honored.
and every opportunity, I think that African people should talk about history. This stuff didn't just happen. Juneteenth didn't just happen one day.
Yes, sir.
It grows out of the historical process. And what I want the listeners to understand about history, it's a part of human reality. For all the 8 billion people in the world, we all have histories, and there's varieties of groups because ethnicities and nations and cultural groups and so forth. They are part of the historical process. So I want to say something general about history. Because history, people are trapped within history, and history is trapped within them. You cannot get outside of that. It's like trying to live outside of your skin. History is a process that people live in various spaces and places in this earth, and they all are unique in their own right. So if I want to know something about Bangladesh women, it might be a good idea to consult the Bangladesh woman so that she knows the story, to tell me from her vantage point of being Bangladesh from 100 years ago, 200,000, however far they go back.
Yes, sir.
That's the source of it. I cannot make assumptions that I know, because I read a book or something.
Yes, sir.
African people are in that position. In the United States of America, if you want to know something about black people, it's best to start with them. And I know that black people have a terrible reputation about being unconscious and dumb and stupid because of the doctrine of white supremacy. But there have always been historians among us, even before the written word or this particular language of English appeared in our history. It's a part of our history. And we've always had people in our experience, whether in Africa and in America, who understood that. Slaves understood that. You don't know their names, but they left us a legacy of wondrous things against tremendous odds in the most powerful state in the history of the world. I agree with white people who say that. This is the most powerful economic, political, military entity in the history of the world. Nobody's gone that far in terms of its awesome power. This country has its feet in 200 countries of the world. America has a presence. And it's not just a nation state, it's an imperialist nation. I want to be very clear on that. And a part of the history of America, what we call the United States, includes these African people who are variously called Negroes, colored folk, people of color, and we come into consciousness we're either black or we're African American. That's where we are now. People didn't always accept that. We accepted Negro.
Mm-hmm.
There's no Negro ever came out of the continent of Africa. Nobody has ever called themselves a Negro. That's imposed upon us by Europeans and their definition of life in the world. And they use skin color to define us, and people are not defined by skin color.
Right.
You go in Africa, you're either Yoruba or Hausa or Igbo. Those are languages, those are places and spaces where their history took place. Those are stories and songs. That's what makes a people, not their skin color.
Mm-hmm.
So black people in America are of African descent. It is proper to say that we're African Americans because there are geographic spaces in the world. We are African people by geographic background.
Yeah.
There's people who are Europeans by geographic background, or Irish geographic background. And so we want to be clear on that first.
Yes, sir.
And say that about history. John Henry Clark, my teacher, said that history is like a clock, which people use to tell their political time of day. It's like
history is like a clock. People use to tell
political, cultural,
time
you
of day.
understand, social, whatever time of day. It is like a compass, which people used to find themselves on the map of human geography.
That's very powerful.
It tells them where they are and what they still must do. That's what history does.
Okay.
I claim that history is just another word for humanity. And if you don't have history, that means you're not a human being. This is what has happened to black people under the doctrine of white supremacy, saying that we don't have history. That's when Africans come from out of wherever. Therefore, you're not people, you're not human, and I can do anything I want to you because I don't see you as a human being. That's what it adds up for me.
Dr. El-Kati, can you talk to me just a little bit about the history of Juneteenth and the origin of Freedom Day for me?
Sure.
Thank you.
I wanted to say something before we get to that. I don't want Juneteenth to just come out of the sky.
I understand. Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Well, Juneteenth is now a national holiday, as you know.
That
It's
happened
been-
with Joe Biden
Yeah,
administration
the Joe Biden
in 2021.
administration. It's been a state holiday in Texas for a number of years, where Juneteenth actually began, and we have those slaves in Texas to thank. This is a part of what I was talking about. History is that the Emancipation Proclamation, that is the reference for Juneteenth, was signed by Abraham Lincoln. It was really signed in 1862, but he waited until January 1st, 1863, to issue publicly the Emancipation Proclamation, which stated that all states slaves who are in states in rebellion against the Union, the United States of America, are now henceforth and forever free. It didn't mean all the black people in all the southern states. It's those states in rebellion who were fighting the United States, who were in the Confederacy, the John, Robert E. Lee, and those people broke away from the United States. There were other states that didn't join the Confederacy. There are states like Maryland, Delaware, Missouri, and Kentucky. They had over 1.5 million slaves.
And chose
But
not
Lincoln
to join
wasn't
the
talking to
Confederacy.
them. He was talking to the states that are in rebellion: South Carolina, Georgia, Mississippi, Alabama. You get that?
Yes, sir.
Virginia. They made up the Confederate Army the other 4 states called border states who had held slaves, Lincoln wasn't talking to them. Okay, when only those who were part of the Confederacy. So in 1863, January 1st, and black people celebrate this, and it's a marvelous thing. I have to say the genius of our people and the incredible endurance and the ways that it's true. They found a way to make a way out of no way. Over and over again in our history. And this is an example of making a way out of no way, is the fact that you have Juneteenth that was we were freed part of the slave population. Incidentally, there were about slightly more than 4 million of our people enslaved. I know you want me to talk specifically about Juneteenth, but I want to
take your time and give us the history
context.
And gems you have,
yeah,
sir.
some context to it. And John just said
Absolutely.
Juneteenth. Well, that's fine, and I'm glad and I'm happy that it's arrived that these beautiful people had the mind and sensibility and intelligence to create this day for us. So then, when the emancipation did not free the slaves, let me make that clear. That was January 1st, 1863. What freed, I'm saying, in quote,
yes, sir,
the slaves was the 13th Amendment in 1865.
And this is what we hear the most about in 1865. Not many people know that in 1863 this actually took place. Or in 1862, it went public in 63. And then we were actually shared with in 1865.
You got it. That's context. Well, what you just said is not a lot of us know that. And we need to know those nuances. The Emancipation Proclamation didn't literally free slaves. It was a pronouncement. It was kind of a moral statement. But it had no basis in law until 1865, when 4.5 million black people, think about it, 4.5 million black people were enslaved. Some say 4 million, 4.5.
Yes,
I take
sir.
the 4.5.
I'll take the 4.5.
I mean, that's larger than some nations of the world. When these 4.5 million were free. I might add, too,
yes, sir,
that there were 500,000 black people living in various parts of the North and the West who were called freedmen, because these are people who took their freedom, like Harriet and Frederick Douglass and people like that. They took their freedom. Sometimes a kind master would emancipate their slaves. That happened too, and that's where those 4 million so-called free people of color, that term's come back. People that used to reply to us, not everybody who's not white. That was a term applied to black Americans, free people of color. That's where the term comes from. And now, of course, we've involved everybody with a little pigment. That's all right, but I'm just saying, you need
the initial context was for us.
Yeah,
back
if you
in
and
the day.
if Frederick Douglass, if we were living in the 1850s, he would refer to you and me and all the other black people as people of color.
Yes.
That's one of the many names that black people had, the nicer names.
Absolutely.
You know the other names, right?
Yes, sir.
Nigger, coon, okay, joker, okay. But there were other names, people of color, colored people. And Negro was supposed to be a respectable term, but it is a devastating term that distorted our history, our humanity. It in effect cut you off from history. If you're a Negro, that means you don't have any history, because there are no Negroes in the world. There are Hausas and Yorubas and Igbos and Frafras and Fantis and Kimbundus and all these beautiful ethnicities in Africa,
Yes,
with their time and space, language, their own customs, habits, mores. That's who people are. If whoever's listening, you are not just black. A people are not just a color. When you identify yourself, you're talking about first history, culture, language, That's what makes a people a people. And values, beliefs, myth, mores, customs, habits, those things don't have color.
Yes.
But every human group has that. When we were in Africa, you might have been the tall, graceful Yoruba woman. I might have been the slight in stature and so forth, an Ashanti man. Because if we had nothing, we might be the same color.
Yes.
But you didn't speak black or Negro or anything.
Mm-hmm.
You spoke Hausa. And I spoke what? Ashanti. That's peoplehood. It's not skin color. I could do the same thing with Europeans. They get mad, but they know it. You know, there's an Englishman is not just white, he's an Englishman.
Yes.
I've been to Europe too, so I know some of this stuff. You know, but I'm talking to a Dutchman, I ain't talking to a Frenchman.
Yes.
And he will let you know that. And especially if you're talking to an Anglo-Saxon, a Scots don't really like Anglo-Saxons because they beat them up real bad several centuries ago, okay? So, but they call themselves white. That's an invention. White people invented race. It's modern. I know I'm going off, but we don't get much chance to say this stuff. Being white is a relatively recent thing in history, as is being a Negro.
I think that's important to note.
As is being an Indian who don't live in India. There were no Indians here. Indians live in India. There were Choctaws, Chickasaws, Cherokees. That's who people are.
Absolutely.
You know, it's not skin color. So we got to overcome that. And we got to stop calling ourselves a race. Call yourself a people, a culture. That's who you're, a history. Not skin color. Doesn't make you who you are. History, culture, language, values, beliefs, customs, habits, mores, and so forth makes you and I, the African Americans that we are during this last 400-year travail of African people being brought to America against their will, and we evolved a new culture in the United States of America. That's why it's proper to say African American. It's not improper. You're talking about two geographic spaces where people develop. We developed as Africans first. The African thing was smothered. It wasn't destroyed. We still say okra, gumbo, yambo. You still have a tote bag. All those are African words. So we're still African linguistically.
We just haven't realized that we've kind of gotten a little further from
the first awakening was in the 19th century. And the national government suppressed that with a huge spy program. Places like the Way where I work, that's what we promoted. Black peoplehood. You're black and you're proud because you're a human being who's proud of himself. No human beings put themselves down if they're aware of their history and so forth. Some people make up history, like white Americans have made up this myth about all of the great things that happen in the world as a result of whiteness. Nonsense. Nobody has contributed more to America than the African people of African descent.
We've talked a little bit about the history of Juneteenth and Freedom Day, but this, I don't know if many people know, this is only the second holiday in our nation's history that celebrates freedom. The first being July 4th, where we celebrate America's independence.
Right.
Now, I'll ask you this, Dr. El-Kati.
Right.
I have always loved 4th of July since I was a child. I loved fireworks. I loved barbecue. It just kind of is the nature of things. However, I never actually felt a connection with the 4th of July and hearing when people talk about our nation's freedom. Can you share with me when you began celebrating and if you did at all, but also what the connection was for you there?
The sentiments you just said are exactly shared by me and many other people like that. We were cloudy on a lot of issues, like the 4th of July. The 4th of July, if I were in a position to have everybody get an impression of the 4th of July from a black perspective, I would ask them to read Frederick Douglass's 4th of July speech of 1852, and he'll tell you what it is and why we shouldn't necessarily celebrate 4th of July because it has nothing to do with us as a people. It was white, so-called white people. And we're going to get that, not on this program, but down the line, we got to straighten this whiteness out. We got to make white people come to grips with this nonsense about them being white and special and true and beautiful, and everybody else is kind of a drag. That's got to stop. And I think black people can help the rest of the world stop the madness of white supremacy. So we are, we have, there are, Black people have tried so many things. Let me say you something else. You mentioned the 4th of July.
Yes, sir.
Well, another way that black people have celebrated themselves out of a tradition is the midnight watch, the 31st of December, before the New Year.
Yes, sir.
That they used to use that as a celebration of the Emancipation Proclamation.
The
last time I experienced that was really at Zion Baptist Church, where people go to church, on the night before New Year's.
Mm-hmm. Watch night service, as we call it.
Okay, that's history.
Yes, sir.
Who did that? Our people, black people. That's why you and I, we 200 years behind them, but they left us that. And we, another way to express your humanity. Cats and dogs don't do stuff like that. Smart animals, don't do stuff like that. That's why I say history is another word for humanity. You're a human being. That's what we all are human beings. White supremacy denies that. There are 8 billion people on the earth. I don't know. That's what they say, but they're the only people who put down everybody. It's not just us. That's the worst example of white supremacy. Because Africans are really the worst example.
The worst example.
It's done it to Asians, and you see that now coming out, people beating up Asians for no reason other than they are not white. And this madness, this sickness, it is terrifying. And I know I have to get back to the point, but Albert Einstein said it best for me. Albert Einstein,
yes,
X equals MC squared, the world's great scientist. And nobody knows really what that means. but he said, it's one of the best definitions for white supremacy. He said, white supremacy is like a contagious disease. This is Einstein. He says it's a disease. He was Jewish.
That he was.
But he said that, and that I think that's one of the best ways to couch this, that people who come to this country, where your ancestors have been here since day one, yes, 14 generations, and he'll come here from somewhere in Eastern Europe or wherever, in Europe, and immediately he has a status of being above you because he's white. He didn't choose that himself. That's the nature of the country. The country is, as being revealed, is a white supremacy country. Mm-hmm. It's not a Christian country. Christian is subservient to white supremacy. Christianity in America and in the West kneels at the feet of the doctrine of white supremacy, which is a real religion. Mm. And a religion is a thing to which people owe their highest loyalty. Whatever you call religion. You can say Christianity or Islam or Judaism or Zoroastrianism and many other religions. It's what you owe your highest loyalty to. Mm-hmm. That's not the case. You owe your highest loyalty, white people, to something called race, which they invented. And superior. This is very important to understand, because this is the moment of reckoning where all this stuff has to come out. And black people are doing a good job. Our writers are coming out of fantastic writers. I'm glad I don't know some of them. You know why? Because it's like getting a new Christmas present. I never heard of so-and-so and so. Wow, yes. How did they get that?
As you discover their work.
Yeah, critical race theory has been around for 20 years. Now it's surface, so people can suddenly, and this is indeed a moment of reckoning.
Do you believe America is ready to acknowledge the pain that has been caused through white supremacy and racism in this country and slavery?
Let me say this about first, because they're going to. I think, I don't care what other people think, I can't tell other people what they think, that white people are human beings just like black people.
Mm-hmm.
They have beating hearts and living affections just like black people. They have 11 basic needs or 4 basic wishes just like black people and everybody else in the world. That is not what we're saying. If I were a racist, I would condemn white people because they're white, you know. Mm-hmm. That ain't what we're talking about. We know there are decent white people among this madness, but the madness prevails.
Mm.
There were decent white people during slavery. Well, the people you don't study in white history and in the American curriculum are the role of the abolitionists in the struggle against slavery. We had white allies, you know, people like John Brown. You can't mention his name because he tried to start slavery with violence. But slavery is a violent institution. It's based on violence. Segregation is based on violence. We have to say that because it's true, not because you don't like white people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, segregation, I was born into segregation. Nobody has to tell me how that feels.
Yes.
You understand? I don't think that all the white people in the world are responsible for that, but some are, and I think I know who they are. You know,
yes, sir.
some white people are decent human beings. I've been fortunate enough to know a few of them.
As
you
am
know,
I.
so that's not what we're talking about.
Right.
Condemnation of white people. That's white supremacy condemns black people because they are black and nothing else. And so, if anything, they have stereotypes of us of being intellectually backward, stupid, funny because you're just funny. You know, these are stereotypes. There must be a million of them. We don't have these things in our culture. But what we say about white people is true. There's some mean folk. There's some murderous folk, you know, among white people. Where is it? The record is there for 100 years of lynching by Eli Ginsberg. Our sister from who helped found the NAACP. Oh God. She's gonna kill me from the spirit. Say, you forgot my name? She's gonna beat you up. Ida B. Wells.
Yes, sir.
She's the one that started this stuff, taking the records on the black people who were lynched.
Mm.
The record. And then NAACP got into it, keeping record. Then Booker T. Washington got into it. But this brave, courageous, incredible human being, Ida B. Wells, started keeping records on how many black people were lynched.
I think that's important to navigate around our erasure in this country.
Yeah, yeah. So we have to talk, and I know we're supposed to be talking about Juneteenth, but things are just not in the air by itself. Like, you know, everything is kind of related to everything. If
Absolutely.
You study hard enough,
Absolutely.
you'll find it's related. So Juneteenth itself is a magnificent thing that our people have done, those people in Texas. Before I go any further about Juneteenth, because there are people who can do this much better than me, I'm asking whoever's listening to pick up a book by Annette Gordon Reed. The last name is hyphenated.
Okay.
Annette Gordon Reed.
Yes, sir.
She's one of the most brilliant people I have ever heard who call himself a historian. She's done a book on Juneteenth, so go pick it up.
Absolutely.
You don't have to listen to me.
Go find the book,
pick it
ladies
up.
and gentlemen.
She was born in the town. She was born into Juneteenth. She grew up a child in Texas, in a little town. She remembers how they celebrated Juneteenth, how they drank the wet soda water and milk, and it was a great time in that little town that she lived in. She didn't think it belonged to other black people. She thought it was just Texans, which it was originally.
Absolutely.
Texans have been celebrated. Why I know about Juneteenth is that I raised on black newspapers, thanks to my grandmother. See what I mean? My grandmother was born one generation removed from slavery. But her
Hold on 1 second. I don't think people heard what you just said. Your grandmother was born one generation.
Thank you.
Removed from slavery.
Yeah, thank you for making me do that.
And you are currently 90 years old.
Yeah.
So the things that you are remembering and sharing from people that have shared with you, but also your lived experience, for people that keep saying racism, slavery, hatred, discrimination, systemic racism, and oppression are all a thing of the past. You're sitting here right now in 2022 sharing with us things that you can recall and have experienced right here and now, still within your human present
absolutely.
mind.
I consider part of whatever it is I call my education.
Yes.
Begins with my grandmother. Okay, she's the one that taught me to read and write. Now I'm not exceptional. People who born to those people who, the first generation out of slavery, it's called the Reconstruction years, where they learn to read and write overnight. Learn to read and write overnight. By 1900, black people were among the most literate people in the world. By that, let me qualify what I mean by literacy. Back in that day meant, were you acquainted with the printed word? Can you read and write at like a third or second grade level? That was literacy back then. Most of the people of the world in 1900 could not read or write. Black Americans could. That's one of the most remarkable achievements in the history of humanity.
I agree with you.
My favorite generation in all of American history is the generation right after slavery. They're the ones who built most of our churches. They're the ones who built insurance companies. They're the ones who built black hospitals. They're the ones who've disappeared now.
It feels almost like they used that hardship and that time frame as fuel to start creating all the beautiful things that our ancestors dreamt of in slavery.
Yeah, what people call the yin-yang theory. For every yin, there's a yang. Whatever. They responded creatively and built all these schools. You know, most historically black colleges and universities were built from 1867, when Howard and Hampton were built. Howard was 1867.
Howard University in D.C. and Hampton University.
The Yard, Howard.
The Howard University. Let me say that before I correct you.
They've been around since 1867. And Fisk was there. Brilliant, great schools. You could stand here, you and I, all day looking up the brilliant people who came up from those three institutions.
We could. For those of you who have just joined us, this is a special edition of Community Connections. This is a Juneteenth episode with Dr. Mahmoud El-Kati, who just received an honorary doctorate this past weekend from Macalester College. He is 90 years old and a gem to our community. We want to share with him and have him share with us the history about Freedom Day, about freedom in this country, and the hope he has for black people.
By the turn of the century, there were 100 black colleges and universities. So you got, if you have colleges and universities, then somebody must know how to read, right? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
That's unparalleled in human history. People are that. My greatest generation, no matter what people, everybody had their generation, is the generation right after slavery. My grandmother's generation, who was born in so-called freedom. You know they weren't free. I don't mean that. On paper,
yes, sir.
The 14th Amendment said they were citizens, but they were not. The Klan were killing them living. You know, like the first 10 years after emancipation, the Klan was invented the same year that Howard University was founded. And for 10 to 15 years, some black person was lynched every 2.5 days. The statistics say that. That's so. In the midst of all that violence, they were creating schools, insurance companies, black hospitals. Yes, it did. It did all of these things we call nursery, mutual aid societies were built by that generation who just came out of slavery. That's unparalleled in human history. Period.
Talk about meeting the needs of the people.
Yeah. Well, that's what our children need to learn in school.
Can you share what you believe we need to be sharing with our kids right now about?
That kind of story for sure.
Please.
One of the things that hurts our children is about history. See, this is powerful psychology that they use on us. Black children, by and large, they come from families and maybe a church and a minister and somebody helps them become conscious of who they are and who their people are. But basically, one of the reasons why black children don't do so well in school is they have no historical imagination. They can't imagine themselves in history. They can't imagine, like a white child sitting next to a black child, he can imagine George Washington crossing the Delaware. Who is what missing from that is Prince Whipple, who was with George Washington, the black soldiers. There were 5,000 black people in the Revolutionary War. You understand? Well, the black child doesn't know that. You know, he thinks only white people fought to make America free. He doesn't know Prince Whipple. He doesn't know Salem Paul, Peter Salem. I know them, and other black people know them who take black people seriously. That there were 5,000 soldiers who helped this country get its freedom from Britain. You know, that's not a lie. The record is there. The people at Yale and Harvard and Princeton can tell you. The people who run these think tanks can tell you. They know more than I do about it. But they won't tell you. And that's the problem, which makes white people ignorant. You don't know. It's not an affliction. It can be changed, you know, as one of my barbershop orators told me. You know, you're not stupid if you don't know stuff. You're just ignorant.
Can you talk about why?
I'm saying that the ignorance can be fixed.
That it can. You said that's an affliction that can be fixed.
Yeah. Know something tomorrow that I don't know today. That's all I'm saying. And it can happen with black children if they see themselves, and black people, I'm just saying children, they can't write a story about that.
So let me see if I'm getting what you're saying correct.
Yes, sure.
You're saying that children, because of the way school is set up and the way society is set up, that black children lack the imaginations to see themselves as the heroes in the story, as the people that are doing all the amazing work, correct?
They can't see. They historically, they can't imagine black soldiers at Lexington and Concord, but they were.
Yes, sir.
You see? Because the racist religion of the country, that's what it is. White supremacy is a religion. And black people are going to have to come to grips with that. That's what those people on the Trump side are talking about. This is a religious conviction. It's a darn thing to do with the Constitution and laws and so forth. They've already disregarded that. You can see that. So we're in for a rough ride, and we got to put on the seatbelts again, you know, and endure this thing. But we'll win. And that we got to win, because humanity must win over such insane beliefs as because a man doesn't have much melanin in his skin, he's superior to me. What kind of nonsense is that, you know? But that's what America teaches. And anybody who stands up against that, and I don't think I'm unique at all. Let me make that crystal clear. I'm just one of the crowd. One of these black people who got touched, as my grandmama said. I mean, you touched, you know.
Yes.
Got touched when I was very young, like many other people. You know, things like self-hatred and stuff like that. That I don't know what that was until I, you know, studied psychology.
Yes, sir.
I don't know what you're talking about. I've been around black people all of my life here, where I've spent most of my life. The people I've been around have affirmed black people that I'm close to. My friends all love black people like I do. See, and that's not I'm not saying black people are better than other people. That's nonsense. That's white supremacy talk. Oh, lovable people. And if you study their history, you'll see that. Come on. No group in this country could have produced a Martin Luther King but black people. Nobody. He says, this is going to be a way of life. Of course, we like other people. Martin Luther King understood your love has to be taught. The love I'm talking about, not Hollywood fop foolishness. I'm talking about a transcendent love. You got to be taught that. That Jesus, that's what he was, a teacher. Teaching what? Love. And don't say love is not a play word.
That's the truth.
Like we call it. It ain't falling in love. That ain't the kind of love he's talking about. It's transcendent. I think it's like, although the great mass of black people didn't follow with him, I think he's a success because he planted the seed. And there's still people. You see him every day on television committed to nonviolence. That has not always been. That's who those people are out there. Mm-hmm. They're in line with his philosophy of love. The love ethic is what he taught. His first book was dealing with love. And his last book, of course, was about the beloved community.
That's it.
That people have to learn to live together without having to live alike. And only love can do that.
You've talked to us today about the history of Juneteenth. We've talked about freedom. We've talked about our footprint, not only across this country, but also across this world. And we haven't really talked a whole lot about you personally, but you are a man of many accolades in the world of activism, education, and known as a lover of your people.
No.
But my final question to you is...
You're going too far, but go ahead.
I'm going too far? Okay. Well, I won't embarrass you, I promise. My final question for you is, what is the vision or hope that you have for your people at this 90th year as we go into Juneteenth weekend coming up?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I had to admit I can't resist hope because I'm enslaved to hope. I mean, you can't. You might as well die if you don't have hope. So my hope is that we will continue to do what we've been doing. The righteous struggle. Black people have done that in the past when we were defined as 3/5 of human beings, or called every name in the book out of being a human being. And we've struggled. And we have made this, in a peculiar way, a better country. To the extent that black people exist, their real struggle is about driving America towards its better self. Mm-hmm. There's a worse self. It's slavery and segregation and all of the humiliation that we've suffered. But there's another side of America that's worth fighting for, and that's its ideals. The ideal that still people are reciting it around the world is that all men are created equal. They should have said women, I know, but all men are created equal. They are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. You're unalienable. No government can take that from you. The right to life, liberty, and happiness. That's the American creed. That's what black people are attached to. The other part, America is a contradiction, as you know. You say, well, there's slavery and there's freedom in the same country. Well, that's a contradiction. How can you, what are you for? Freedom or slavery? Mm-hmm. The country decided slavery. Black people are fighting for freedom. This is another chapter in our struggle for not only freedom for ourselves, but freedom for humanity. Black people in America makes it better for other people who come here by slamming themselves against the wall of segregation, of going to jail, being beaten. That made it better for people like Somalis. You don't know that story, how America was. There was a time when no African could become an American citizen, no native African. That was race laws, see? That's been changed. In 1965, they had to change the immigration laws because of black Americans. You know, they had limits on who could come into the country except for people from northern European states. Until 1965, there was only 100 Indians from India, real Indians, allowed in the country legally. Till 1965, when we broke the back of that. So I'm not saying that only 100 Indians came. Of course they came in and found ways to get here. But the fact when they opened the doors, that's when you saw Indians, East Indians coming here now. And now they own 80% of the motels in America. That's good. He couldn't do that without the civil rights movement. Most people don't know that. And I would say one of the first things that an immigrant should learn, I know he's going to have to learn other things, is learn something about African Americans. And then you know America for sure. You know both sides of the story.
That's powerful.
You can. Because the American dream is what Malcolm X, for black people, is an American nightmare. It's more a nightmare than a dream. That's true. You can get mad at Malcolm for whatever reasons. But what is it? Slavery is not freedom. I don't know how you cut that. Segregation is not freedom. Jim Crow is not freedom. What we're dealing with now is a form of neo-racism, the rebirth of white supremacy under the aegis of Donald Trump. That's what he's doing.
Neo-racism.
He didn't invent white supremacy. He didn't create that. He's exploiting something that's already here. He was dying, and he knows that. How could you get this connection between a New York boy and Queens, where I spent finished junior high school in Queens? Same community. He wasn't from the rich.
Yes.
You know, Rocky. He ain't from that 19th century money. He's nouveau rich. And he was aware of that there are people, he want to be in that class, but he can't go there. You know, Rockefeller, DuPont, he can't go there. You know, that's part of him. And he lucked out because his daddy had some money and gave him $1 million. He said that. I didn't say that. That's quite a start, $1 million. You know, so he may be a dummy, you know, literally. He may be a D student. We don't know that. But he's rich. And in America, for some people, I didn't say everybody, some people, be they black or white, rich is all you need. They think that's life. It's not. That's not the be all and end all of life, to have money and that kind of stuff. And it's the whole story of the human family is about dealing with that stuff, the super exploiters of other people. And I'm talking about black people. The black people, those guys in Africa today who run these countries on behalf of Europeans and Americans, are not good people. You know, Sese Mobutu was not a good person, although he did a public relations gimmick with having the big championship fight in his country, in Zaire, in the Congo. You know, he's a crook. See, so it ain't got nothing to do with color, except he's a crook. That's all.
Yes.
You know, we don't mean, so that's why we shouldn't define ourselves by what white people have imposed upon us, by belonging to a race.
Thank you, Dr. El-Kati, for joining me today and for our special episode around Juneteenth, and for coming and sharing so many gems that you have today. I hope that something said or done today has encouraged somebody to be enslaved to hope, like you talked about.
My pleasure.
Thank you again to my lovely guest, Dr. Mahmoud El-Kati, for joining me today, as well as the Williams family who had him graciously participate with us. I hope that something said or done has really drawn you in today, and that you found this episode informal as well as educational. This weekend, please make sure that you look up within the Twin Cities or within your state where there is a celebration of Juneteenth, so that you can go out and support our local communities and fellowship and celebrate Freedom Day in your own way. Thank you for joining me, and I look forward to connecting with you soon.